My name is Abel Collins. I'm the independent candidate for Congress in Rhode Island's 2nd District. You may all have just watched WPRI's debate between Congressman Jim Langevin and candidate Michael Riley, who are my opponents in the election. WPRI shamefully, in my opinion, excluded me from the debate without any reason. They said it was an editorial decision made before any polls were released in our district. When they did finally conduct polls, they showed that we were at a high enough level that we should have been included. We've done everything possible to be considered a viable campaign, and we are indeed viable. So the shame does not belong only to WPRI, but also to my opponents, Langevin and Riley, for participating in this debate and tacitly endorsing my exclusion from this race. So it's an affront not just to me personally, but to the hundreds of volunteers I have, the thousands of hours of work they've put into my campaign, making us viable, the tens of thousands of supporters we have around the state, and of course to democracy itself, because I am on the ballot, and voters, if they're to make an informed decision on November 6th, should be able to compare me in the flesh with my opponents. So that was prevented tonight by WPRI. I'm happy here to be presenting an alternative on RI Future, and this again will be up on our website later. So thank you for having me. As you will see, I am a much different candidate than either Congressman Langevin or Michael Riley.
Abel, the first question was leveled to Jim Langevin to ask him basically why he, what was his crowning jewel in Congress. We really can't answer that question, but the second question to Michael Riley was certainly pertinent to this race. Why are you qualified? Why do you think that Congress is an entry-level job, was the way the question was worded.
Correct. Well, I'm running for Congress because that's where the issues that I care the most about are being debated. Why I feel I'm qualified is because I've done work in a number of fields here in Rhode Island that has prepared me well for working in Washington. I've been an advocate and an activist for environmental issues, social concerns, economic justice issues. I know what it's like to work at the State House and push legislators to do the right thing. I know what it's like to talk to the public, gather input from people, and craft policy. I went to Brown University and graduated with a degree in political science, so I know how governments are supposed to work. I know from experience how they're failing us, and I would like to do nothing better than to represent the people, the constituents of the 2nd District in Washington, D.C.
So again, there wasn't much format to the debate, and the candidates talked over one another quite often, and didn't give us much time to get these questions down. But one of the other questions that was asked of Michael Riley was if he would favor the gold standard, and he answered that he would tie our currency to some type of index, and that was, of course, largely tied to our deficit in this country. So how do you think is the best way for us to address our deficit issues in the country right now?
Well, taking it back to what Mike Riley was talking about, our monetary policy is tied right now to the Federal Reserve Bank, which is, of course, a private organization which controls the interest rates that banks have to obey in terms of keeping money overnight in their deposits, among other things that they control, setting monetary policy. And right now, basically, the Federal Reserve is controlled by the interests of the big banks. And I think if we wanted monetary policy that made sense for the people, we should make it more accountable to the public. And as far as I know, I'm the only person running for Congress nationwide who's proposed an actual reform of the Federal Reserve, making it more accountable to the public by giving the public members of the boards of governors of the Federal Reserve regions power to select who the banking interests should be. Beyond controlling monetary policy, I think the deficit can be addressed by reforming the tax code, as was talked about during the debate, making sure our corporations are actually paying their taxes and not keeping all their profits in offshore tax havens, completely evading our entire tax code, and of course closing individual loopholes as well.
The economy was another big topic in the debate here, and in particular, why the economic recovery was taking so long. So in your opinion, why has it taken the national economy and Rhode Island's economy so long to recover?
Well, we did nothing to change or reform the underlying financialization of the economy, which has shipped jobs overseas at an increasing rate. So over the past 4 years, we actually have seen some things in the economy succeed. Corporate profits are at record margins right now. But what we haven't seen is the middle class benefit at all. So we need to bring jobs back home, increasing our small-scale manufacturing. This is one of the things that I've proposed doing by pursuing fair trade policies rather than free trade policies. These are policies basically that would level the playing field between American industries and foreign industries, or our multinational corporations, which are gaining unfair advantages. We also, Mike Riley talked about how there's no solution here locally, and I just think that's not the case. We have an economy that's local, and we need to encourage what's strong in our local economy. We saw a report just in the last week which emphasized, front page of the Journal, how strong our agricultural sector is. I come from an agricultural background myself, so I know what it takes to grow food, and I know that we could do a lot more at the federal level to encourage small-scale farming. We don't do that at all right now through our ag bill, and I would push for that in Congress. Other things that we do well locally, we have a very compact state. It's ripe for having the best transportation system in the country. We should have more public transit, we should have walkable and bikeable cities. Building those things and providing public transit produces jobs and produces the economic environment that creates better job growth. Beyond that, of course, we can invest in renewable energy, and we're already starting to see that happen, but we need to see that happen more quickly.
Of course, jobs is a big thing on people's minds these days, and certainly was no shortage of opinions from your opponents in the debates. So how do we go about creating jobs in Rhode Island? How do you do that from the national perspective?
Right. Well, I think I just sort of answered this question in the previous one, but I've proposed a Green Works program. We really need a works program on the scale of what we did after the Great Depression. There's 23 million jobless or marginally attached people in the workforce right now. So, like I said, we can build walkable, bikeable communities. That means more sidewalks. Simple things, we still have the sidewalks from the WPA. Those are the best ones out there still. We need to build more sidewalks. We need bike lanes. We need better public transit. We need communities that are connected to one another. And viable communities are also going to have a lot of local agriculture in them, people interacting with one another, connecting with the earth that way, and actually producing the nutrition that makes healthy communities. Then again, we need to bring manufacturing jobs back to Rhode Island. They are the biggest sector of jobs in Rhode Island, and we've lost a lot of them. Of course, the jewelry district is empty, and we have to revitalize it. We can do that through fair trade, stopping these free trade agreements that both the Republicans and the Democrats have been pushing for years now. It started with NAFTA, but there's a Trans-Pacific Partnership being discussed right now, secretly behind doors, and it's the multinational corporations right now that are running those negotiations. And if they have their way, we're going to lose a lot more jobs in the coming years. It's time that we brought jobs back to Rhode Island, and not just any jobs, but jobs with livable and fair wages. One thing that we could do at the federal level is increase the minimum wage. It's been a long time, and right now the minimum wage is not a wage that people can survive on. So those are just a few things we could do to improve our economy here.
Also, a lot of talk during the debate about taxes. Talks about tax cuts across the board. Talks about flat taxes. Talks about rescinding the corporate taxation. One of the debate participants harped on creating a strong middle class. What do you think that we can do to relieve the tax burden on businesses and individuals in the United States?
Well, again, we need to make sure that our high-income earners are paying their fair share of taxes. So those Bush-era tax cuts have to pass out of existence. We need to make sure the corporations are paying their corporate taxes. There might be the possibility that we could reduce corporate taxes if they actually paid them. We need to increase capital gains taxes. Right now, people are letting their money sit in investments rather than investing it in capital improvements for their companies because of the way our tax code favors investing in equities over those job-creating investments. So those are things that we can do with our tax code. I certainly don't think Riley's assertion that we can lower taxes and increase our budget or keep our budget steady make any sense. Langevin was correct in pointing out that problem.
Okay, there was much talk in the debates about raising the age that somebody can claim Medicare coverage to 67 from the current of 65. Where does the candidate Abel Collins stand on this issue?
I absolutely oppose any effort to raise the age limit for Medicare. We should be talking about lowering it. Back in the healthcare debate, we were talking about 55 as an age. I would propose that we provide Medicare for all, a single-payer healthcare system. As it stands, the health insurance industries control the healthcare marketplace. It's really a trust that needs to be broken. They're charging outrageous fees. 30% of all healthcare costs are going to administrative costs. We can make all those savings just by getting rid of the health insurance industry. Right now, CEOs in our healthcare insurance industry are making $20 million a year. It's outrageous that people are profiting on the sickness of the American public.
And the next question for the debate participants was about a woman's choice. In particular, overturning Roe v. Wade, putting a ban out there on 7, 8, and 9th month abortions, and various other choices that have to do with women and their health. Where does the candidate Abel Collins stand on the option of choice?
I am the only pro-choice candidate in this race, and I'm proud to be that. I believe if we want to reduce the number of abortions in this country, what we need to do is support our women more. We need to create a society that they feel comfortable and safe bringing their unborn children into. This means things like giving women equal pay for equal work. It means things like really trying to lessen the incidence of domestic abuse, which ties into another one of my policies, creating a Department of Peace. It means single-payer healthcare. Women want to bring healthy children with opportunities to succeed into the world, and that's what we need to provide them, a world that gives them that opportunity.
Would you favor legalizing same-sex marriage and or the repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act?
I would support the passage of a same-sex marriage bill in Rhode Island, certainly. I would also vote to overturn the Defense of Marriage Act, yes.
And the second question was really specific about a specific case here in Rhode Island, but it was about the death penalty. Do you favor the use of the death penalty for capital crimes?
I do not think the death penalty should be imposed in any case.
The next question was about term limits. Do you favor term limits for congressmen and senators?
I view term limits as the sort of stopgap measure to keep corruption out of Washington. There's other ways that we could get corrupt officials out. Number one would be campaign finance reform. We need to move towards publicly funded elections if we really want to get the corruption out of Washington. If that's not possible, I would support term limits.
And the last question was on the recently passed voter ID law in Rhode Island. Do you support a voter identification law nationwide?
I do not support voter identification laws as they've been written and passed around the country. They appear to me just as vehicles for disenfranchising voters. I think we need to be encouraging as much voter participation as possible in our country.
Okay, the next question was slightly different for both participants of the debate. For Congressman Langeman was, why should Rhode Islanders send you back to Congress? And for Riley it was, why should they vote for the party of Bush? So I'll ask you, why should Rhode Islanders vote for an independent candidate?
This is a question I get a lot out on the doors of Rhode Island residents. And I like to point to the experience of Bernie Sanders, one of the only independents in Congress who's actually been a very effective legislator. Both parties have to come to him when they want to get a bill passed, so he's able to get his language into bills. Also, as an independent, I wouldn't be tied to any party line, so I would have that ability to speak the truth, go out in public and push on issues that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are willing to address. So I think Rhode Island has a lot to gain strategically, but also we have a lot to gain just by having a different point of view represented in Washington. And I think, if I could go back, I think that's one of the things that we've lost by having to do this debate this way. Right now, Congress is under a 20% approval rating. The majority of the country feels like we're going in the wrong direction. It's, it should be at a premium value right now to have dissenting voices who represent other views heard, and it's an affront to the public interest to exclude different opinions at this point.
Okay, the next series of questions related much to foreign policy. The first pertaining to Iran and the Israeli policy, or I should say the U.S. policy of staunchly backing Israel in just about every move that they make. What would be your policy as to U.S. relations with Israel and Iran?
Right. And specifically, I think they asked about if Israel chose to go to war with Iran, should we automatically support them? And I definitely do not believe that is the case. We have to rethink our whole Mideast peace process strategy, going back to when Clinton was president, Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat actually had a viable peace process going. We need to return to the table and really have an honest conversation. We need the two-state solution. We need to come out strongly against the illegal settlements in Jerusalem. It's important that we actually be a fair arbiter if we want to maintain the idea that we are promoting a peace process. So that's my position there.
The next question pertained to the attack on the embassy in Libya. Many say was provoked by a hate film, for the most part, that was propagated on YouTube. What do you think the U.S. response should have been to this situation, or do you think that the U.S. had the appropriate response?
Well, in this case, of course, tragedies happen. We aren't going to be able to prevent every tragedy. The loss of our ambassador there was certainly a major loss for our country. I don't know whether Obama did enough to prevent it or not. I think the investigation is still going on. Overall, in terms of our foreign policy, I think we need to move away from our militaristic attitude. In order to do that, I propose that we create a Department of Peace, counterbalance our Department of Defense. We need to be focusing not just internationally, but within our communities, building up conflict resolution skills on the family level, community, straight up into the international arena, and that's how we're going to become truly a nation of peace.
Okay, the next question was on immigration reform. This is a really kind of a hot button issue in the United States right now. Many people think that we should just build a fence and keep everybody out, but others think that this country was certainly built by immigrants of many different colors and creeds. Where do you stand on reforming our immigration laws?
Well, I think we are entirely an immigrant society, except of course for the Native Americans who were stomped out of existence, to everybody's detriment. I think we need to re-envision our whole immigration policy, and it has to be viewed in a much more systemic way, much like all of these problems need to be viewed in a more systemic way. So we have to look at why is there such pressure for people to come here illegally. And this goes back to our free trade policy. NAFTA decimated the agricultural economy of Mexico, and it's created a flood of illegal immigrants who have come into the Midwest, the South, the Southwest to take some of our agricultural jobs, right? So we need to think about trade policy when we're thinking about immigration. I think we do need to try and raise the levels of immigrants that are coming to our country. As we've seen, every economic boom in our country has been associated with higher levels of immigration, so they are not necessarily a problem. However, people who are here illegally should not enjoy the benefit of just having come here illegally when we're looking at the people who have been waiting for years and years in other countries.
The last question that was asked of both the debate participants was to give a letter grade to President Obama and to our Governor Chafee. So I'll ask you on the presidential level first. What kind of grade would you give our sitting president, Barack Obama?
I think I would give President Obama a C. I think he's been dealt an incredibly hard hand, but he made some tactical errors in tackling healthcare reform first. He really needed to go after financial reform, in my opinion. That's the cancer that's eating away at our society, and it really needs to go. So he made tactical errors, and he has not been bold enough in many of his policies.
Okay, and our Governor Lincoln Chafee, what letter grade would you give him?
I'd probably give Chafee a B. Again, another person who's walked into sort of a buzzsaw upon taking office, and he's made good appointments, in my opinion. As the governor of Rhode Island, he does not have a huge amount of power, so he cannot be blamed for a lot of the issues that the state faces. I would put significantly more blame on the General Assembly.
Okay, well, why don't you give us a couple of minutes of a closing statement here?
Sure. I think we've endured, 150 years of combined Democratic and Republican rule in this country. Over the past 40, we've seen real wages decline for the middle class, while CEO pay has gone through the roof. We've seen jobs flee overseas. We've seen our civil liberties drastically cut back by things like the Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act. Wherever you turn, you see our democracy in decline, our economy barely able to tread water. It's time for new policies in Washington. The Democrats and the Republicans do not have any to offer. They say the same talking points that they've been saying for years. And it's time to have an independent voice in Washington, D.C. Somebody who will be an activist and an advocate for the working class. Somebody who will talk about poor people. Somebody who will talk about raising the minimum wage or providing health care to all people. These issues have been left off the table because we have not raised our voice and pushed either of these parties to the right spot. So it's time to have independents who will do it.